Hey peeps, just wanted to get another update out as I've had so many lovely comments and well wishes after posting the last one. I thought it would be good to do a bit of an update. So yeah, a massive thank you for all of those lovely messages from everyone, but an even bigger thank you to my immediate family, including Lucy's parents, for looking after me. Lucy's had to be at my side constantly since getting home, and I had such an amazing weekend with my brother James, who cooked for us, took out our dog Misty for walks and played with our little boy to keep him company. It was amazing. And Lucy kept me alive since I came home, which is no mean feat. I can tell you that Lucy's had all sorts of her own stuff to cope with, as well as looking after our nearly 3-year-old boy. So yeah, massive thank you to Lucy. Another special mention to my mum as well, who stayed with me on the first night of the surgery while I was completely out of it. So that was a pretty big deal. It was, I was completely out of it, like I said. And again, Lucy for visiting me in hospital, which have got a bit of a funny story to talk about later on in this. But my parents-in-law have been supporting with everything from getting me home from the hospital to looking after our son, helping Lucy out with her various appointments and just supporting all around. So just wanted to start the update with saying how grateful I am for all that support in all its shapes and forms. Then also the NHS staff. I know that, people when they have encounters and they're at the NHS really value what NHS staff do. And I want to say a massive thank you to the staff there. They're proper legends. I mean, proper legends. Not the kind of overused type of legend, as they're actual legends. All of the staff I met are hardworking and caring people. And I don't know how they don't burn out with compassion fatigue and stuff like that. They're working so hard. And you see so much diversity in the NHS. People from all over the world and with all sorts of backgrounds. And I love that. I think we're so lucky in the UK to have the NHS and to be able to attract people that we have. We are so incredibly lucky. I do feel for them though. They're clearly stretched. One of the nurses that I met was working the night shift and she was having to take a part-time cleaning job as well just to keep afloat. So yeah, massive thanks to the NHS, and I really hope that, they continue to get appreciated. And yeah. So on the day of the operation, I had to get prepped, and I was really, really nervous about the op. I don't tend to get too nervous either for that stuff. I'm, usually in control of my nerves. But my mum took me over to the ward, and I had to get prepped for the operation. The staff were really friendly and clear with me about the best way to prep. They offered loads of reassurance, and loads of the staff are so family orientated. I noticed that, we're all kind of reverted to talking about family, kids and dogs, and showing photos to each other and just offering that kind of reassurance that put me a bit more at ease. Before the op, I kept needing to go to the toilet. I think the nerves were getting to me a little bit there. It was kind of like getting ready to play a huge gig or, play a massive football game or something. The doctor came to meet me and walked me round to the operating theatre. We were chatting all the way over, but to be honest, I wasn't really taking anything in at that point. I was just a bag of nerves. We got to the operating theatre and it was super cold. I was instantly shivering, probably with nerves too. And I got on the operating table and confirmed everything, had a bit of a joke with the medical team. And I think it's because when I get nervous, I resort to kind of joking around a little bit. But in the meantime, the anaesthetist was struggling to get a cannula into my arm. And if you don't know, a cannula is one of those things that goes into your hands or your wrist for easy access to add more drugs. They explained that they would intubate me in a way that would allow them to control each of my lungs independently because of the need to collapse one of the lungs for the repair. They put an electric blanket over me that was so nice and warm, and then injected me with an initial drug that just made me a little bit more comfortable. And the last thing I remember is them basically saying to me, "Here we go, think of something nice." So then waking up was a bit of a blur. When I came to, it was a bit confusing and my pain started small, or I had a small amount of pain, but then it really started ramping up. I had a sore throat from the intubation, and I had a cannula on each hand and seemingly thousands of tubes and wires coming out of me, including ECGs, drips, stat monitors and pain lines. They'd put a drain into my chest, which is a tube running into the operation site to drain excess fluid. There was also a line of local anaesthetic running into the operation site to keep it numb. But the more I came to, the more pain I could feel. And I ended up taking dihydrocodeine. dihydrocodeine, I can't say it, paracetamol, and then liquid morphine, and eventually a morphine line going straight into the veins that was controlled by a button that was on a timer, so I could only press it every 5 minutes. I couldn't raise my head to see if the button lights had come on yet, so I'm pretty sure I was just clicking away at that button non-stop. But this seemed to stabilise the pain down a bit and stabilise me for the next bit of my journey. So I was taken down to the ward, and on my ward there was me, a guy in his late 20s, and 3 guys in their 60s. One guy was in for bowel cancer, one for lung cancer, one having lung tests for a potential lung disease, and the younger guy in for crashing and being crushed by a 4-wheel drive motorcycle. The young guy was a massive prick, I have to say. Honestly, I wish so much that he wasn't in the same ward as us, because he was up on the first night until about 3 a.m. on his phone speaking to his mates, and he was just shouting at them, and he was so rude, and it's just not what you want to be around when you've just had an operation. I was a bit too out of it on the first night to figure out what was going on, but that became a bit more apparent down the line, unfortunately. He was, like I said, super aggressive to people down the phone, but he was, nice enough to your face when you're talking in the ward, so I didn't feel too intimidated, despite feeling kind of quite vulnerable just coming out of operation. But that first night I couldn't stop coughing and I kept getting hiccups, which was pretty awful. And being quite unsettled, I was pretty much waiting to hit the morphine button every 5 minutes. And this kind of resulted in a nausea the day after, but thankfully they had these anti-nausea injections that worked really well. When you're in that much pain and that level of pain relief is immediately available, it's really hard not to use it, to be honest. So I basically got through that first period by hitting the pain relief really hard and drifting in and out of a dreamlike state. Before the operation, loads of people say stuff like, enjoy the drugs, and I'd say that I have a healthy respect for the power of these drugs, and I really needed them, but I was never in a position to enjoy them. Like I said, it was much more from a place of needing to take them to feel more normal. And as an example, when I was in recovery, straight after the operation, they give you twice the dose of liquid morphine, and they give it to you twice as often. So you're effectively getting 4 times the amount of liquid morphine in recovery than you would in the ward. But coming out of surgery, it barely touches the sides. I almost started to feel panicky about pain relief not kicking in quick enough. Later on, when I took this half dose of liquid morphine, it was way more powerful feeling, and I felt quite sick taking it. And some of the practicalities of being in the state that I was in, the amount of wires coming out of you makes it feel really difficult to move around or do anything. Going to the toilet required these bedpan things that are shaped so that you can urinate into them. But you have to angle yourself in such a way as you cannot spill anything, and you always feel like you're going to overfill these pots. Those first few weeks after surgery just smell ungodly. Kind of sick man's piss. It's not nice. But then you have to buzz the nurse to come and take your piss away, and I was pretty apologetic about it given the state of the stuff that they were having to take. I was wondering if this is the origin of taking the piss, actually. I looked it up and I found that the saying taking the mickey actually comes from the saying taking the piss, because it's Cockney rhyming slang. Taking the mickey bliss, which changed into taking the mick or taking the Michael. The actual origin of the term is quite interesting though. To take the piss is a reference to a related idiomatic expression, piss proud, which is a vulgar pun referring to the morning erections which happen when a man awakens at the end of a dream cycle, or may be caused by a full bladder pressing upon nerves that affect an erection, otherwise known as a morning glory. This could be considered as a false erection, as its origin is physiological, not psychosexual. So in a metaphoric sense, then someone who is piss proud would suffer from false pride, and taking the piss out of them refers to deflating this false pride through mockery. Anyway, back to the nurses taking your piss. They have to take your piss and measure it to see that the water going into your system equates to the amount of piss coming out. But one of the practicalities did me on the first night as I dropped the nurse call button whilst having a wee, and I was left holding my piss pot for over an hour while trying to wave my phone around like it was a Coldplay concert to get the nurse's attention. Meanwhile, all the pain was setting back in as well. The old guy in our room was an absolute menace for farting. He'd had bowel surgery, and I can't imagine what that does to your system, but he was letting out these 7 to 10 second belters, and the smell was unreal. This dude's family actually left after he did one of the farts to go home because it was so bad. And he let one loose when Lucy was there, and she started gagging because it was that bad as well. I just kind of sat and tried to let it pass because there's not much I could have done. But the younger guy, oh God, we have to talk about the younger guy, because what an absolute piece of crap this guy was. Through the best part of 3 days in the same room with him, I must have heard him threaten maybe 3 or 4 people with stabbing and assault and all sorts. He was dealing with a police investigation into one of his dogs that had attacked somebody, and he was telling the guy at the other end of the phone how to get rid of the dog, as in how to dispose of the dog and what to say to the police. There was this constant verbal diarrhea of the absolute worst stuff in the world coming out of his mouth, accusing people of being paedophiles, calling people everything you could imagine, with a lot of disability focused abuse of people, calling people spastic and stuff like that, which is just out of order. And as a guy with a disabled sister, I was really unsettled by this. I witnessed him being racist and just generally abusing and being rude towards staff. It kind of made me feel unsafe at times, and I know that my other roommates felt the same, but they were really uneasy with being around him too. I felt worse for the staff though. The nurses in particular were incredible, and with a room full of people being totally dependent on them, I just don't understand how and why people turn nasty towards the nurses. It was pretty hard to kind of sit back and witness and not being able to do anything about. I have to say a massive thank you to Abby and the team who looked after me on the ward. I know they probably won't hear this, but they were amazing. And when you're on a ward, you have a main nurse looking after you, but there are all sorts of other nurses, ones that are there to get you teas, coffees and biscuits and stuff like that, nurses that give you water and obviously take the piss, nurses focused on pain meds and there's all sorts of things going on. And more senior nurses, known as advanced medical practitioners, kind of buzz around and get involved every now and again, but they kind of oversee things. And Lucy actually knew one of the nurses when she visited, so it was really pleasant to see a familiar face for her when she came to visit. Southampton General is a university hospital, so there are a load of student nurses and student doctors. I had a team of student doctors come around to see me. It was quite weird having all 5 of them come over and speak to me. Not one of them really looked me in the eye when talking about stuff, so I found it quite funny, so I started playing on it and bogging them all out. That was just a little bit of fun though. I had totally lost my dignity at that stage, just sat there in my pants. I mean, I kind of completely gave up on maintaining my modesty with a hospital gown and was just sat there in my pants and shorts with a half-shaven chest, a bunch of wires hanging out of me and, a few scars here and there. After the group of doctors came to see me, one of the student doctors came back to speak to me about my history and my case. She was actually really lovely, and she explained that she was studying to be a doctor at the University of Southampton and was over from China. I seemed to get really easily confused though, and this was most apparent when I was ordering off the menu for food. And the food was pretty good. It definitely doesn't deserve its kind of poor reputation, but I don't know what I was ordering. I think they were trying to explain stuff to me, and I just ended up ordering, half meals all the time. But of course, the young guy in the room took umbrage to everything food related, was extremely rude about it, and he lived off crisps and fizzy drinks the whole time. Oh, and a couple of beers as well. One thing I started struggling with was a build-up of stuff in my chest though. So the nurse had brought out a nebulizer. And I remember nebulizers from my sister Tashi when she used to get pneumonia and stuff when we were younger, because she used to have the the nebulizer to release stuff in her chest. Being quadriplegic, she doesn't move around a lot, so stuff does get stuck a little bit. But yeah, the whole point of the nebulizer is to shift all the stuff in your chest and get it moving, and it worked a treat. I started coughing all sorts of nasty stuff up. It was really horrible, but I still had the drain in my chest, and the pain of the coughing was just so horrible. It was a little bit tainted, I guess. But I know that everyone can probably appreciate how nice it is to kind of just clear your chest a little bit after feeling like you can't breathe that well. So with visitors, my mum came to visit on the day of the surgery while I was just a bit of a little pile on the bed. And then Lucy came to visit the day after surgery, and I was really drifting in and out of consciousness. I actually got a visit from the hospital radio team while Lucy was there on the second day, and I requested AC/DC Back in Black, which they duly played later in the day, so good on hospital radio. So that kind of takes us up to my second night in hospital, which was also a bit of a disaster because the local anaesthetic drip ran out of battery, and this was basically the thing stopping me from feeling the plastic tube that was going into my chest. So things started getting really painful. I ended up having to have a ton of morphine to get me going while they sorted out the anaesthetic drip again. And as with an increase in morphine comes the sickness. So I started feeling really sick and had to take the anti-sickness drugs again. My oxygen levels were pretty crap the whole time after surgery. And while other things were improving, my oxygen levels were just crashing. Sometimes it got down to some really concerning levels, and they were kind of, nurses were looking at each other like, what is going on with this guy? I think, you're meant to have levels of 90, 95 to 100 even, of oxygen levels. And mine dipped below 80 at points when they were measuring it. And also had these episodes of like really high heart rate as well. And obviously I was resting, I was in bed, and I had a heart rate that was, more akin to someone on a run. Yeah, it kind of also gave me quite a bad headache. Or I don't know if it was from that, but I had this bad headache as well. So on the morning of day 3, I tried to sit up as much as possible, but I knew Lucy was coming to visit later. So I got back in bed for a bit of a sleep and to try and get my oxygen level sorted so that I was a bit, more with it for when Lucy came and saw me. Because the previous day I was a bit out of it. And while I was in bed, 2 of the older guys in my room started getting discharged. This involved getting their drains out, getting them up and walking, and lots of waiting around. It looked like I'd been in hospital for another day, so Lucy arranged to come and visit. Meanwhile, the young guy had got at least 10 of his family into the ward or area around the ward and was kicking off at staff, and he was going to self-admit himself from hospital, so they were going through the paperwork for that, but that was again quite stressful to be around. I got my snoozing in the morning and got up ready for Lucy's visit. My oxygen levels were still low, so I was hooked up to the oxygen and Lucy was massaging my legs, because there's always this risk of surgery of getting these blood clots in your legs. So I was wearing these lovely stockings, but Lucy was just kind of, massaging my legs, which was nice. Most of the other guys on the ward were being discharged and they were leaving, so I still had all of my tubes and stuff in, and like I said, it would look like I was going to be there another day, and that was until we met Nurse Winnie. So I had a brief encounter with Winnie earlier that day, who told me off for sleeping and not being up and about, which was interesting. But the really crazy experience with her, who was the self-proclaimed ward bully, was when she took umbrage with me being on oxygen and Lucy rubbing my feet, and decided that it was time to take my drains out and get me gone. It was really as quick as that. 1 minute I was sat with Lucy trying to get my oxygen levels back to normal, and the next Winnie was off on one. And Lucy does a great impression of her, so I'll let her do this bit.
What's this with your legs up? Why are you still on oxygen? Why is your drain still in? No more TLC. On this ward, they call me bully. You need to get up and walk around. We need to get your drain out today. You need to go home.
So then we went for a bit of a walk up and down the aisles of the ward, and it was pretty tough going. But I felt pretty exhausted, so I sat back down with Lucy. The nurses came to take my tubes out, which is honestly really horrible. Like, having a plastic tube pulled out of your chest is not fun. I was sat back up after that with Lucy, eating my hospital dinner, and then in walked Winnie again.
Get up now. Are you still here? You take him home now. Where you pop? Don't worry, he can walk now. He'd be much better at home. No more TLC.
Luce has asked me to say, before you say that she's being racist, bit on a Chinese accent, Lucy's family are all originally from China, so it's no different from me doing an Australian accent, really. But that was it. The other nurses were almost apologetic in getting me ready. I don't think anyone really thought I was ready to come home. But I got all the drains out and Lucy helped me get ready. And then, I had to do the long walk through the hospital, having not really done a lot of walking before. And we walked right out and Lucy got me to the front of the hospital. Being outside after not being outside for a few days was quite weird. Sat at the front of the hospital, and it was really horrible actually walking out with all these people smoking around the outside, because obviously my lungs were still not at full capacity, so you kind of walk out and you just get bombarded with cigarette smoke, which is not nice. And then Lucy and her dad Malk helped me into the car, and we had to take what felt like the longest drive home. And Malk was trying his best to make the ride smooth as possible, but the roads around the hospital are really bumpy, and I felt every single bump. I felt every corner. Whenever I saw a roundabout coming up, I was really like, oh God, here we go. But we made it home, and it was really nice to get home. It was nice to be out of hospital, and I guess my biggest worry was being a bit more of a burden on Lucy. But yeah, after 3 days in hospital, I got home. I think that's a good place to leave it for now. I'll do another update about being at home at some point. There's not really anything of note to say right now, but maybe there'll be some fun bits that happen. I hope you enjoyed this episode though, and I look forward to seeing everyone soon. Thanks for all the lovely well wishes. Massive thank you to, like I said, to my family, my wider family, and for everyone reaching out. I can't thank Lucy enough for everything that she's done, particularly because she's here with me at home 24 hours a day. So, massive thanks to her, and, wider family and everything. So, thanks everybody.